All right, hello everyone. Stan Eppen. Welcome to the Note Investor podcast. And today I'm joined by Sherman Arnowitz from Keyhole Financial, who will be talking to us today about seconds, which is a topic that I'm actually looking to learn a lot about myself. So Sherman, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. So like I said, I don't know much about seconds, and it's an area that I get questions about from time to time. So it's kind of good to have you on to, explain to us a little bit about the world of seconds and how they work. So,
Great. I started about almost 24 years ago, and I'll give the short version is I lent money to my college roommate right after graduating. He was doing some sort of real estate deal, and he promised to give me back the money in a month, and I lent him some money, and a month went by, and a year went by, and literally 15 years went by, and obviously I lost my best friend, but 15 years went by, and I got a certified check in the mail for $5,000
oh, wow.
and a phone number. And I called him up, and of course, the first thing I said to him was, "Okay, Scott, where's the interest?" And we rekindled our relationship. And, "Hey, Scott, what are you doing?" And Scott kind of fell upon, and this is back in the late 1990s. Scott fell into, "Hey, there's a company, DieTech, and they have second mortgages, and they've tried to get the homeowners to make payments, and they just can't do it. And so I buy these loans from DieTech." And at that point in time, he was probably one of three investors doing this. And he said, "Hey, why don't I start showing you how to do this?" And so he started showing me how to do this, and it was just too good to be true. And like I said, maybe there were 5 other people doing this. And at the time, there was a lot of equity, and so using the F word, and I mean foreclose, and threatening them, the homeowners, to kind of say, "Listen, you're a month, you're 2 months, you're 3 months behind." So we were buying these second mortgages from DieTech for anywhere, I'm going to guess about 30 cents on the dollar back then, and there was tremendous amount of equity.
And this
And
was the
so we
late
did.
90s, you said?
This is the late 90s, early 2000s. And
It's
so,
funny you say that because we didn't talk about this before, but I have a friend here in Colorado who was doing the exact same thing in Colorado, like in that same time frame.
and
So,
I'm sure, like I said, when I mean there were about 5 people doing it, there literally were 5 people doing it. It was the greatest kept secret. And it was almost like he was doing the servicing out in California, and I'd be getting checks in the mail. And I just kept thinking to myself, he scammed me once with the $5,000. Is he scamming me again with this? This is just too good to be true. And the reality was, he was teaching me, and whether it was karma, he was teaching me how to do it. And there came a point where he said, "Okay, I've taught you everything I know. Go ahead and start doing it yourself." And at that point, and it was the early 2000s, at that point I had a decision to make. And the decision was, I can continue to do this and use my own money to start investing, or I can go to other private investors and create these funds and get these investors to give me money and create these funds. And that's what I started to do. And my first fund was 35 notes. These were just second mortgages, non-performing distressed second mortgages. And it was about $75,000 that I needed to get. And I went to friend, insurance guy, lawyer, blah, 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 and they started investing.
what did it
And we
cost you
did.
to set up the fund if there was only 75K?
Um,
Was it
I
less
would
back then?
create, yeah, I would create an LLC. They all had to be, qualified. Maybe it was a couple $1,000s, and I just charged the fund for that. But
Right.
the point is that, these were usually 5 years or 7-year funds, and we did phenomenal on that first one. And then there was a second one that I found more notes, more seconds. And we bought, the next one was 77, around 77 seconds, and it was about $400,000. And I went back to the same investors and some new investors and did the same. And I kind of started finding this niche and started doing well. And all of my funds have generated between 20 and 35% return on an annualized basis. There was one fund that we didn't do well, and everybody didn't do well during the disaster of 2008. Where we bought notes in 2006, and there were tremendous amount of equity in the properties, and the downfall of 2008 came around, and that house that I had $200,000 worth of equity, it just magically disappeared. And so we were able to, even through that, we were able to get our investors back. I think it was about 94% that they got their money back.
That's not bad. A lot of people didn't do nearly that well during that time frame. That was pretty ugly. Yeah, it was very ugly, and I felt pretty good at least being able to get 94%, and everybody really understood. And for me, the telltale is when we do come up with new funds, and as I mentioned before, a fund for us can be 20 notes, and the largest fund we've managed was 400 notes. And again, only seconds. And the upside for me that I'm doing something right is we've never lost an investor. And in fact, most investors that come in are asking, hey, can I bring my friend in? Can I bring my golf? I have an associate. So we kind of build upon that. And so based on, just the way the universe kind of took over with Scott and I only focused in seconds. And like you were telling me your story about first and diving into first because, well, that's what you knew and that's what you went after. It was the same with me. To me, I know enough about first, like I speak French and first is Italian. There's some similarities, but that's where it ends. And so I focused and I really enjoy working with seconds. I like the fact that you can get in relatively inexpensive to start up. You can buy a second anywhere from 15 to 30 cents on the dollar. So maybe your entry cost is $5,000 for a note, $8,000 for a note. I like the fact that with seconds you can buy a lot more notes. So if I'm gonna buy 5 or 6 notes and I've invested $40,000-$50,000, all right, I know from experience whether I buy 5 seconds, 50 seconds, or 500 seconds, I know the nature of the beast is that out of those 5 notes, there's probably going to be 1 note that's going to crap out. No matter how much research I did, it might be 2 years go by and the guy loses his job or something happens. He starts paying his first mortgage. They foreclose on him. They foreclose. There's no money left over. Okay, I just lost $8,000 that I invested. I know it's part of the game. I can't and I don't get upset by it, but that's 1 out of 5. I have at least 2 out of 5 that I know I'm going to start getting performing. And let's say it's a $40,000 UPB and the guy's paying $500. If I make contact with him and try to do a workout, I can't afford $500. Okay, what could you afford? I could afford $300. Great. Starting now, let's put you on a temporary payment plan. For the next 6 months, start paying me $300 a month. He doesn't know that I paid $5,000. He knows that he owes me 25 or 30 or whatever it is that he owes me. And so I know out of those 5, 1's going to crap out. Pretty much 2 are going to start paying. 1 is going to usually want to do some sort of short sale. Hey, I owe you $40,000. Would you take $30,000? Sure, if you pay me within 7 days, I'll take $30,000. So even though I lost the $8,000 on the foreclosure, I just made on $30,000 where I paid $5,000, I made $25,000 on that. Minus the $8,000, I'm still up $17,000, and I have 2 loans
that are performing. And then I say the last loan is kind of a wild card. You know, we don't know where it's going to fall. But at the end of the day, like I said, whether it's 5 notes, 50 or 500, when we keep throwing that stuff, the positive, the negative in the swimming pool, at the end of the day, we're usually around the 20 to 30% return on investment on an annualized basis.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like seconds are a little more of a numbers game, right? I mean, firsts are obviously tend to be more expensive. So if you were to get zeroed out on a first, that would be pretty horrifying. But yeah, as you said, it's more of a numbers game where, yeah, you're going to get wiped out on some of them, but then, you know, some of them are going to turn out to be really large winners, bigger winners percentage wise than probably a first would ever be when they work out. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot more strategies. When people come to me and they want to learn how to do this, the first thing I ask them is, well, how much money are you looking to invest? And somebody that's saying, well, I have about 50,000 or I maybe have close to 100,000, I don't necessarily think that they're a good candidate for investing in first. And I tell them the upside and the downside of both investing in first and seconds. And like you just said, Dan, you know, the downside of investing in first is that it does cost a lot more money to invest. And as much as it's a more secure, safer type of investment, it's still a gamble. And with more of that gamble, more of that risk, with seconds, if you're doing it right, there's greater rewards. And because we're buying anywhere from 15 cents to 30, 35 cents on the dollar, we have a lot more different strategies that we can implement. You know, when you're dealing with a first, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're paying anywhere from 50 to 80 plus cents on the dollar, you really don't have the room to start playing with the homeowner and say, oh, you don't want to pay me $1,500? You could only afford $1,000? Okay, no problem. You really don't have the luxury to do that, whereas on the seconds, we do have that luxury. And there's just a whole bunch of games. You know, if the borrower owes $25,000 on the unpaid principal balance, and he hasn't paid for 4 years, and that's another $8,000, we play different things. Hey, you know what? You owe me $25,000, but you also owe me $8,000 past due balance. Tell you what I'm going to do. For every $1,000 that you put towards your past due balance, I'll match that with you. And so if he's going to put up $4,000 and I'm going to forgive $4,000, well, I just made $4,000, which to me, my mindset is if it costs me $5,000 to buy the note, you know, well, he just paid off his past due balance, and I just bought the note. And so, you know, I'm even, so to speak. And so there's a lot of different strategies that we implement to kind of help out the borrower, but also to speed up the process. And so there's a lot more forgiving, and like I said, there's a lot more strategies.
Yeah, so on the due diligence side, how closely do you look into the borrowers? I know on first, I personally don't do it a lot. I know some people do it more, but I'm wondering how that plays with seconds. Are there differences in how you scrub notes and figure out which ones you want to buy?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, over the years, I've been told with first, you don't really care about the homeowner necessarily. You're focusing more on the property itself and the value of the property. Whereas with seconds, we're taking both into consideration. There's probably about 10 to 15 different factors that we look at when we're doing the due diligence. And for us, for me personally, it coincides with my risk factor, and different people have different risk factor. So risk tolerance, so some of those factors differ. For me, I don't want to buy a note where the unpaid principal balance is greater than $75,000. If I'm going to buy a $100,000 UPB note and I'm going to pay 30 cents on the dollar, I don't want the exposure of $30,000 out there, and that's a large note for me. I want to keep my notes where there are 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15,000. And so for me, I have these designated rules where the unpaid balance is less than 75,000. The fair market value should be greater than 75,000. I don't want to deal with a second mortgage where the house is only worth $40,000. A lot of times, if the borrower needs a new roof, well, I'm screwed. He's going to obviously put that new roof on versus deal with paying with the second. We look at, obviously, how's he doing with the first mortgage? What's the status of that? Is he in bankruptcy? Bankruptcy doesn't necessarily scare us. I'll stay away from Chapter 13, but Chapter 7 doesn't bother me. We look at how long has the borrower been in his house. Somebody that's been in the house for 10 plus years is going to fight tooth and nail to stay in that property. So here's all these different factors that we look at when we're doing the due diligence. And each one of those factors has different weights and rankings. And so at the end of the day, I would probably say the due diligence becomes probably 70% mathematical based on formulas. And I'd say probably 70% that, 20% of that is experience, that over the years you kind of have an inkling of what's going on. And then the last 10% is just gut/luck. And so, there's a lot that goes into it, but a lot of it is mathematical, logical. And I've taken a lot of what I've done over the last 20-something years where I've used Microsoft Excel and how I go about that process of A to Z. And I created a program called Evaluenote, and it's available for first mortgages and second mortgages, that it takes a lot of the work of Excel, and you import the Excel file into Evaluenote, and you literally just sit there and start pushing buttons of saying, well, I want these states, I don't want these states, I want this, LTV equals this, CLTV is this, I want it where the homeowner's been in the house more than X number of years. And so it's doing a lot of the process of elimination, but also behind the scenes, it's calculating and ranking based on certain criteria. So at the end of the day, it's coming out and saying, look, out of these.
Oh, you still there? I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I lost. Oh, there you're back. I lost the sound for a minute. Sorry about that.
Okay, where do we leave off?
Like about maybe 30 seconds ago.
Can you
were
hear me,
talking
Dan?
about Evaluenote, and you were talking about putting in your parameters and having it do rankings. And
Dan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Dan?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Now I guess you can't hear me, it sounds like.
No, now I could hear you.
Ah, okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I got
no problem.
My internet connection was unstable, but I'm not sure
why. Where did we leave off?
So about a minute ago, probably. You were talking about Evaluenote and putting in your parameters and having it spit out rankings.
Okay, so should we start there?
Yeah, I'll start there, and then I can have this edited afterwards too.
Perfect. So as I was saying, Dan, a lot of the due diligence with seconds, we're looking at the borrower and we're also looking at the property. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. And each of those factors, we put rankings on based on their importance. And there's probably about 10 to 15 different factors that we rank and we weigh them. And so about 5 years ago, I came up with a software package called Evaluenote, which basically does what we do in Microsoft Excel, except it does it a lot faster with a little bit more bells and whistles. And so we import the Excel file into Evaluenote, and whether it's first mortgages or second mortgages, and you literally sit there and start pushing buttons. Hey, LTV should be this or greater, and I want homeowner where they've been in the place greater than this, and a fair market value is this. And it's doing all of this work for you, and behind the scenes, what it's doing is it's calculating and it's ranking, and it's putting it in a format to say, well, look, out of these 30 notes, I like these 15 notes, and I've put them in a specific order based on the weight ranking factor. and I've put some pricing down what I think based on the importance of those factors of what I think these notes, you should be buying these notes for. And so it's a pretty cool package, and it certainly helps with the due diligence process.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, well, I'll have to make sure I add some links to that when I put this out on the newsletter and then on the website.
That would be great.
How can people find that in the meantime?
It's just Evaluenote.com, or they could go to KeyholeFinancial.com or KeyholeAcademy.com. About 4 years ago, I put together an online education program for people that want to learn how to do what we do just in the second mortgage space. And so it's an online, there's a bunch of courses, but the main course, online, 26 chapters, videos, text, graphics, quizzes, final exam, and it really takes you through A to Z of what you need to do to start investing in seconds. And so it's a great package. I have a lot of my students that take the course and off they go. And then I have a bunch of students that take the course and are still a little nervous. And so they come to us, and we've developed this joint venture mentorship. So they'll buy 3 or 5 notes themselves, and we'll split the profits 50-50, but my team will be there every step of the way holding their hand and giving them the extra confidence so that they can then go out and start doing it by themselves. And so it's been a great arrangement, and I find a lot of the people that take the course, that sign up for the mentorship, we develop a long-lasting relationship. And a lot of times these students come back and they say, hey, I found a list. Why don't we do a partnership together? And so that's what I'm looking for. It's not just about take my course and that's it. It's take the course, let's develop this relationship, because at some point I want it, it's going to be a long-lasting relationship.
Yeah, and that's what I like about your stuff too, is you're a very active operator. Sometimes notes in general, but in like real estate in general, there are a lot of folks who offer training programs, but then you find out that they're not actually that active when it comes to trading. I mean, it sounds like you're actually involved in a lot of note deals as well, right?
Absolutely. We probably maintain about 500 notes at any given time, and again, all seconds. We're constantly creating funds, and we're maintaining, we're brokering, we're doing the funds ourselves, we're doing joint venture mentorship programs with students, and so we have those loans as well. So it's really, you have to be in the thick of it. You have to go through that process of doing it so that there's some credibility when you're talking to other people.
Right, because market conditions can change over time as well. That's the other thing I hear about some programs where folks might have been active 10 years ago and then not as much now. So that's really good.
It's always changing, and it's so important that, we were talking before and you were saying about some people saying, well, there's no seconds available, and it's the biggest load of crap, and you have to first look at who's making those comments, but there's tons of seconds, and it's just a matter of knowing where you have to go. It's not easy, and a lot of times I tell my students, one way to do it is call 1-800-CHASE, and it's a pain in the butt, and no one likes doing it, but when I started, that's exactly how I did it, and it's developing relationships with banks. It's developing relationships with other investors like me, some bigger, some smaller, going to these seminars, going to these workshops, making phone calls, network. And for me, there's never a shortage. We just finished a PNC deal that I was involved with 4 years ago when we bought a couple $1 million worth of notes. And then there was one that was about 8 months ago that PNC came out again that we bought another $2 million worth. So they're out there. It's just you have to be in it. You have to be active participant. And I have some students / investors that they're like, that's well and good, but you know what? I just want to buy 5 notes this year. And that's fine also. And so whether they're going to buy performing notes or non-performing notes, I'll make them available to you. It depends how high you want to climb the tree to get what you want.
Right, exactly. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, because like I was saying before we started recording, yeah, I mean, when I sort of started getting into the notes business, I was told that there weren't a lot of seconds out there, but I was told that by somebody who focuses exclusively on first. What I've always told people when they ask me is I don't know anything or don't know that much about them and haven't done them. And it's not that I have anything against them. It's just I've always been neck deep in first, and I've always, had been able to bite off more than I can chew with first. So I've never quite had the bandwidth to look into it just yet. So, but definitely an interesting domain.
It's very interesting, and how I landed here is how I landed here. Like we were talking about, and it's done really well for me. It's been a lucrative business, but for me, the reason I love it is because every day I'm learning something new, and every day I'm meeting somebody different, and that person might start out as a student, but sometimes eventually that student becomes the teacher or the specialist, and they might be, I work with some of my students, and 3 or 4 of them are just phenomenal at due diligence. And so when I get a list that somebody sends me, I'll go to them and say, hey, I need you to do the due diligence on these, and we'll work out a deal together. Or somebody's really good at doing workouts with the borrowers, or skip tracing. And so it's kind of, as I'm training these people, it's finding out what their strengths are and then focusing on those strengths to make the whole process go as smoothly as possible. And so that's what I like about meeting these people and the longevity of these people.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, I don't have training offerings, but I've had people who have offered to help me with different things in exchange for teaching them some of my processes. And I've had people do due diligence for me and scrub tapes where I've said, okay, I'll show you how I do it. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I get some tapes in and hand them off to them, and then they'll do the scrubbing for me, which is great because it saves me a lot of time. And I'm not paying someone
Definitely.
else to do it.
Definitely. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, I try to kind of fill in the blanks. I created Keyhole Financial to create funds for private investors, and then I created a Keyhole Academy to teach people how to do it, and I saw a gap with the due diligence, and so I created Evaluenote to fill that gap of the people that weren't that great with Microsoft Excel and needed kind of a speedier process.
Yep.
And I'm about 90% done with another program called Note Emporium. And Note Emporium, a lot of my students, once they start buying notes, whether they're going to do the workouts themselves or they're dealing with another servicing company, they're like, okay, well, what do I do with the loans? And so I created
Yeah.
Note Emporium. And Note Emporium, it's a loan management program. And so whether it's first or seconds, you're going to put all the information in about the borrower. You're going to put in about the mortgage information. When they make payments, you're gonna make those payments in there. You're going to send letters out, and I've taken my loan management program, which is the mortgage office, which is a fairly expensive venture. I took all of the bells and whistles and was able to put it into this program, Note Emporium. The goal, selling it for $1,499.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably about 2 months off for that. Everything I've mentioned, Dan, Note Emporium, Evaluenote, Keyhole Academy. I'd like to offer any of your folks in your world 50% off until the end of the year. So whether they want to take a course, whether they want to buy Evaluenote or eventually buy Note Emporium, it'll be a 50% discount, and I'll just you can put it in your newsletter or email. We'll just put a code in there, and they'll
Yeah,
get the 50% off.
that sounds good. We'll come up with the code, maybe Fusion or something like that.
Great.
But we'll send that out afterwards. No, that's good. So Note Emporium, is that functioning kind of the same way? I know a lot of people I use Pipedrive or Podio to manage their portfolio.
Yeah, those are more contact. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're more contact management programs.
Yeah, Pipedrive is actually intended for salespeople.
Mhm.
Podio, which I have not really used, from what I understand, that's actually kind of like a project management software, and people have highly customized both to make them work for Note. So what I have works. I've done a lot of customization. It's a very general solution that you can kind of use towards Notes, but it's maybe not as specific as Mortgage Office and some other things.
Yeah, this is specifically built from ground up with the intent of first and second mortgages. We're not recreating the wheel. We're taking that wheel and we're making it affordable. And it's specifically for first mortgages, second mortgages. Here's the information about the borrower, mailing address, property address, emails, customized fields that are going to help you, mortgage information about the first, the second, payment information, receiving that payment information, sending out letters, sending out reports, specifically for first and second mortgages, nothing else.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because that's definitely a problem people have is after it takes them long enough to buy a note. And then once they do, like I get all sorts of questions from people that I know. They're like, okay, what do I do with this thing now? What's the next step?
Right.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you, Sherman. That's probably a pretty good stopping point. We'll
Mm-hmm.
stop there from now, but I'd like to have you on again at some point in the future because I think we really probably only scratched the surface on seconds. I know we can go a lot deeper down the rabbit hole with that.
That's great, and also, Dan, if I don't know how many people were in your world, but if we wanted to put together a some sort of webinar that they could sign up for, and I could kind of go through, let's say, preliminary due diligence or the life of a year of a second mortgage, and kind of take them from start to finish, so that they can kind of see what that world looks like. I certainly would be open to that also.
Yeah, that would be great. I actually just upgraded my Zoom account so I can do webinars,
Oh,
and I'm
good.
doing one next week. So we'll have to talk after this and get that on the calendar.
All right, that sounds great. That
All
sounds
right.
great. Well, I appreciate speaking with you, and thank you for bringing me into your world. And let's keep in touch.
All right. Sounds great. Well, thanks a lot.
All right, I'll speak to you soon, Dan.